We interviewed Bronwyn Taylor for this episode, and bless, she was so lovely.
Wasn't she the cutest human? We were talking about girl maths in this episode, and it's been a conversation we've wanted to broach for ages.
And it roughs me up.
Yeah. And like really, and do you know what? I was kind of on team don't mind about girl maths. After this, I'm like, it's got to be cancelled.
Yeah. She was converted.
I'm
Thank
I'm a
goodness.
convert. You just wait though, it takes a minute.
Yeah.
But it was a really great way, I think, to debunk the conversation of why this is problematic.
And she wrote an amazing article about why she hated it so much.
That's right.
Yeah.
So someone from our community actually put us in touch with her. Well, not put us in touch with her. It was like, you should read this article.
Yeah.
And we were like, yes, these are such good points. So yeah, for anyone that is interested in girl maths or maybe jokes and makes like an Instagram caption like girl math, because I keep seeing them, it's still a thing.
And because Soph was at me to do a podcast episode on girl math, and I just couldn't articulate why it roughed me up so much. So thanks, Bronwyn. You really helped me out here.
Bronwyn, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
We've been wanting to talk about girl math for so long. We haven't really known how to do it.
I know. So I was like, Vic, come on. I hate it, but I don't know why, and it makes me feel prickly, and I can't articulate it, and that just frustrates me. And so I'm so glad that we can just palm this conversation off to you.
I know, but that's how I felt as well. I heard it on social media and on the radio, and I thought, oh, that's like just rubbing me the wrong way a little bit, but I didn't really know why. And I tried to ignore it. I'm not like a TikToker. I don't even know if that's
Is that what
that's probably not what you call it. But when I started noticing it coming into like mainstream media, like in the news, economic commentators talking about like girl maths in the articles. So I came across something where a female economist was writing about cosmetic sales during COVID and like that they'd gone up even though like people had a cost of living crisis, and is that girl maths? And that was the point where I was like, that's enough.
I've had it.
I had a rage blackout, and I thought like I just need to sit down and like think carefully about what actually I have a problem with. And it's totally not about saying like, oh, you said girl maths in your article, you started it. You know, it's not about that. It's just like, oh, this is annoying actually. So like maybe we can have a productive conversation coming out of it to say like maybe gender-based stereotypes are like not great things to make jokes about.
Yeah.
I feel like with gender stereotypes or actually, honestly, just girl math in general, I really wanted to get on board with it because I thought it's pretty funny. Actually, side note, for anyone that doesn't know what girl math is, should we give some examples of what it would be?
If I bought something and then returned it, I basically made money.
If I go shopping and I don't buy anything, that means that my budget for the next day is now doubled.
So I bought this purse for $38, which means it was $30. Round down, not up. Girl math.
I feel like I girl mathed earlier this year when I bought 12 bottles of tequila, and I was like, look, well, I've bought 12 bottles. I've got summer ahead of me, and now I won't have to pay for tequila for the rest of the summer. And little did I know that was actually girl math, because I've paid for something up front, which means I don't have to then pay for it again and again. And it's kind of like that.
And like, I mean, I'm definitely not coming from a place of high ground. Like, I do it all the time as well, but it's just attaching the name to it that I find really annoying. Like, we all maybe make decisions that like are based on more emotion, or we just want it and you go, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to buy it.
Yep.
Totally fine. But like, we don't have to call it girl maths and then associate like silly financial decisions with like a gender in particular. But I think other examples are like, oh, me and my mum could both wear this outfit, so it's like 50% off. Or
that's the one.
If I pay in cash, it's literally free. Like it's
you're like,
not quite.
Or it's one where it's like, oh, it was after midnight, I can't remember making the purchases, so they don't count.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if
drunk
that's even
purchases,
one, but
yeah.
Totally. It is like kind of similar to like that, you know, oh, the calories don't count if it's a Friday or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
But I agree. I think it's the fact that it's girl math. It's not just math or boy math or bad math. You know, it's literally girl math. And so, when we have constantly been fed these stereotypes that we're bad spenders and we need to save more and all of that, just fueling all of that into it with the whole girl math trend is that we're bad with money. And I hate it.
Yeah. I also think even girl instead of woman, I think, there's so much to unpack, but the ZM breakfast show, I think, were doing heaps on it. Like they were almost doing like a segment. I don't know if it was every day, but it was heaps.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but like have a giggle at some of them. You know, I'm like, it is funny. Like I'm not trying to shit all over it because like it's quite nice. And when life is complicated and heavy to be able to have a laugh. But what I would love to talk about today is firstly acknowledging there is some funny girl math. Like it is, some of the jokes are quite funny, but we want to unpack why it's problematic and talk about how it can actually be more damaging than perhaps a lot of us realize. So can we actually just, before we start, can we do a round robin? Like who here is like, you? I know Vic hates it. Do you hate it? Would you say you're like, no, I'm really not on board with it?
Yeah, I hate it.
Yeah, okay. What?
I mean, I would say I hate it because of what it is instilling. But I also think, hey, if it's got us talking about money, you know, if it's got us budgeting, like the whole, if I buy it and share it with mum, then it's 50% off, you know, that's kind of good spending. And I'm meaning like 10%, like, you know, very, very small. But it's got people talking about money and spending money and conscious about their spending behaviours, which has always got to be good.
Yeah, totally right. And also, you know, we do all do these things, and if we shine a light on the like little tricks and things that our brains do and have that conversation in a productive way, like that could also be super useful. So yeah, there's a lot of good that can come out of girl math, but yeah, as of right now, I hate it.
Yeah, I love the stance. We're taking it seriously.
What about you, Soph?
We hate it. Oh, I kind of want to hate it, but I don't. I don't know. I think I'm in two minds because I fully see how problematic it is. I kind of find it funny, but I'm on board with unpacking it more and changing my mind at the end of this conversation. What? Are you surprised?
The challenge has been set.
Yeah, I'm just like surprised for someone who is so educated and, you know, very conscious about what they say, you know, PC wise in terms of making sure they don't offend anyone or, you know, they don't make stereotypes, all of that.
Yeah.
For you to be like, oh, but I like the funny side. It's quite contradictory.
I know it
No,
is.
it's nice to see. It's
no,
fun.
I think I like...
I'm like, excellent.
Yeah, I don't know. I also just think... I don't know. I think there's a part of me that is really on board with the idea of sometimes we take everything so seriously. But I also think the reason that I'm not on team I hate it straight up is because I don't think I've delved deep enough into understanding it, which is what I would love to talk to you about today, Bronwyn, because you've obviously done a lot of like thinking around it and research around it to try and articulate it in a way where like those who think it's a trivial lol can start to be like, oh, I totally get it. So I'm actually excited.
And I totally agree. It's like when the world is constantly like, oh, cost of living crisis, yeah, you know, we're all a bit stressed out at the moment with money. To have a laugh can sometimes be quite nice. Yeah.
So as someone who is very entrenched in the entire world when it comes to economics, actually, do you know what might be quite helpful to start with? Could you explain what your job involves? Does it basically mean you can zoom out to what's happening from an economic lens and kind of predict what's happening? Like, what does it mean?
Yeah, so I mean, there's heaps of different types of economists, right? And I'm just one little flavour, but
What flavour are you?
applied microeconomics. So I have spent the majority of my career doing economic consulting, which pretty much just means when people have a problem that they're trying to work through, you use economic ideas, economic frameworks to help them to work through that. And that might be looking at whether a firm has the ability and incentive to increase price, depending on like who else they're competing with in the market. Or it might be even looking at things like real estate commissions and saying like, okay, if I was a real estate agent and this was my commission structure, I would have the incentive to do this, this and this, but not this. Like maybe to sell as many houses as possible because the extra effort that I take to get more isn't worth it in the additional commission. Like breaking down the incentives of individual companies, people.
I think I need a bit of a Victoria Harris explanation here. Sorry,
No.
Bronwyn, to sound rude, but can you break it down even more for me?
I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Bronwyn would come into the curve and she'd be like, is it worthwhile doing a podcast in terms of the revenue that it generates, the audience we reach? Or is our time best spent doing something else? Or should we increase our rate? Is it kind of like that? You're going into businesses and whereas there's microeconomics, which is what you do, and there's macro, which is looking at inflation, interest rates,
so you're
all
not
of that.
doing that. Okay,
So I'm definitely not doing that.
Why is girl math so problematic? Can we break that down with some examples, things that you were like, okay, I now can pinpoint why, in fact, I hate this trend.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me give it my best shot to convince you. So there's no evidence that women like are less capable in any way, or actually that there's any difference by like any gender on math, science, engineering, technology, those kinds of things, finance. There's a perception of that, right? So like for me, like the starting point, even though it's a bit selfish, is like I find it personally annoying girl math because I need people to have confidence when they work with me that the work that I've done is accurate, the maths that I've relied on is legitimate. And so if we're perpetuating a stereotype that women are a bit worse with maths, a bit silly with their money, then that affects me like personally in my job.
Gosh.
And I think the reason that this hasn't been called out that much before then is because there is already such underrepresentation by women in economics and finance and things like that, that there's just not that many of us to say like, hey, this is like personally affecting me. So there's that. But I think...
well, before we move on from that,
Yeah.
have you experienced overt like sexism when it comes to presenting an idea for a business or your thoughts on something related to maths, quote unquote?
Yeah, totally.
What sort of stuff have you experienced?
So when I was trying to find a supervisor for my honours dissertation at uni, the lecturer said to me, I don't take female students. So like I couldn't actually do my research with him. So that's one. Wow. That was pretty crazy. That's another story. But more often, I mean, it doesn't happen.
How is that even allowed?
It's
I'm
not
sorry. It's like
definitely-
saying, sorry, I don't take overweight people. Or like,
So
sorry, I don't take...
blonde hair people.
Yeah, it's definitely not allowed.
Yeah.
But so that's one extreme example.
Did you report him?
Yeah.
Good. I can just tell I'm going to love this by the end. Like, fuck girl math.
But like more generally, on the odd occasion, someone will say to me like, oh, you work at blah, 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 economics. But like, what do you do there? And I'm like, oh, yeah, we do economic consulting. And they say, yeah, but what do you do? I'm like, yeah, I do economic consulting. They're like, ah. And
like
it's
waiting for you to be like, oh, I'm the PA.
Yeah,
or
totally.
Not that I'm sitting on PA, but like just assuming that you have a less senior job than you do.
Yeah, exactly. Or other times I might be presenting something and then I just notice the client might like look to somebody else, like more, I don't know, a male colleague to ask a question about the numbers. I'm like, I can answer that actually. More generally, I just think it results in like having to buy your way into every conversation. Like some people can turn up and automatically have credibility in the room that they're in. And I feel like I have to like earn it by saying sensible things for a little while, and then I start to notice people responding more positively to me. Not that they were responding negatively to me before, but I just have to earn it every time like a poker buy-in, and it's just annoying.
It's kind of like we're already pushing shit uphill. Like, give us a break. Don't then throw girl math on top of us being like, oh, you're actually shit with numbers. It's like we have been fighting this battle for generations to improve our financial literacy, and then it's like girl math,
I guess it's also like if you think of any kind of racism or it's any minority where there's this like preconceived notion that you are XYZ, you're having to work extra hard to convince them otherwise and then prove yourself from there. Like you're not starting on equal pegging is kind of how you feel.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so much research that those stereotypes have like an actual effect, even though they're baseless. Just the fact of them being around, I think in psychology it's called stereotype threat, and it's basically the additional pressure that you feel when you're in a situation where you're part of a minority group, there's a negative stereotype about you. This could be totally subconscious, or it could be conscious. If you're in a position where you have an opportunity to either perform well or to confirm that stereotype might be true, that additional pressure will make people do worse. So it's also like a bit hypothetical, but for example, if you ask a female in a classroom a maths question and they know there's a stereotype about being worse at maths, they feel the pressure not only to like get the answer right for themselves, but also that if they get it wrong, they're confirming the idea that all women are like a bit bad at maths. And that additional pressure makes people do worse. And the research is like really clear about that, even like with kids as young as 5.
I've definitely felt like that when I was but it was an age thing when I was younger. And at work.
Same, actually.
Yeah, and
me
I was
too.
like, oh, I don't want to ask a question because I don't want to be a bad Christian. And then they're going to be like, oh, she's terrible at that because she doesn't know the answer and she's asked a question. You know, so then you just fuel this whole environment of not asking questions and not learning.
Totally.
And yeah, it's kind of like, oh, I'm the young
like a
one, so I'm not
self-fulfilling
supposed to
prophecy,
know. And I don't know. You just you just sit in the corner and don't ask any questions, and then you become worse off.
I remember being in Australia. I just moved over for a job over there. And I remember I was 23 and I was turning 24 and I was managing a team where like the talent that were on air were like 28 and the other 3 producers I worked with were all like about the same age. So I was like significantly younger. I remember it was my birthday and I hid it. I like took it off my Facebook. Someone sent something to work and I like hid it under my desk. I didn't want people to know that I was only 24 because as soon as someone's like, it's your birthday, how old are you? I was like, I just want to avoid that conversation because I already feel out of depth in this role.
Yes.
And they're just going to think that I'm young and stupid and don't know anything. And actually, ironically, that's like a job that I actually ended up, like they just didn't extend my contract.
Whereas that should be reframed though in the fact that you've got this job and you're so young is amazing.
100%.
And, you know, yet the fact that we almost instill that negative mindset of I shouldn't be here, almost an imposter syndrome of I shouldn't be here because I'm so young. It's like, no, amazing, you are here and you're so young. Like flipping that narrative.
It's almost like kind of back to what we were speaking about with like any kind of marginalised groups. There's also that internalised judgment. And I guess that's kind of what you mean with the, what's it called?
A stereotype threat.
Yeah.
And
It's like you think of yourself in the same way that you know other people are already thinking of you.
yeah, or it could just be like totally subconscious because things like the number of women in the room, like the proportion of women in the room when you're sitting a test can make a difference to women's test scores. Just something
Oh my God,
as
I read a
little
book
as
about
that.
this.
It's crazy.
Diary of a CEO's book, and he talks about,
Yes.
I can't remember the study they did, but there was something to do with the test they were taking, and they got to write men's names or women's names and almost be this other person as you were taking a test.
Yeah.
And people that associated with the men's name did better, and like it was just like
It's so
fascinating.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's just little things like that.
Yeah.
If there's studies where like the examiner says, oh, women usually do worse on this, or like, you know, good luck girls or something. Just like little things can then result in women doing worse in that environment, even controlling exactly for competency.
Yes,
So
and it was.
it's
I think I've heard of that, and it's like
such little
they said
things.
before you went in, men tend to do better on this test than women.
Yeah,
and they go
exactly.
in and they sit. It's the same groups at the same test, and then in the other room they're like, women tend to do better on this test than men. So they've instilled this stereotype in both groups, and
It's like subconscious bias or something.
all you have to
Totally.
do is like, I think they say like make gender salient, like prime gender in some way by doing an activity that relates to your gender or anything like that, and then you start to get an effect.
Yeah.
It's so crazy how subtle it is. And so just little things like saying girl maths around and about perpetuating these gender-based stereotypes can affect people's actual performance, even though they're competent, equally competent. And I've experienced it where I like at uni, if I was like one of the few women in the class and like I get asked a question and I might say something dumb, and like that could just be me saying something dumb. But sometimes I've really felt like conscious that it's been like a weird response from me and gender related.
it's also putting the gender with it. It doesn't need to. You never hear things like boy math or you know that kind of thing. And what really used to piss me off was phrases like she-o, and it's like you never hear of he-o or
Totally.
or like you never hear it's like Forbes most influential woman. What is it? Forbes top female CEOs. It's like you never hear of top male CEOs. It's just CEOs.
No,
Do you
it's
know?
like you're on safari, like, look, there's a woman in the wild succeeding. And that makes it so much worse. Like, do we really have
Start picturing like tigers and
like, here's a woman, like,
like God,
through.
she's our fish out of water. Like,
Totally. That's the implication.
Okay. So it's like it's almost like by people are almost trying to highlight women who are doing well in their space, but like rather than thinking that they're doing a positive, it's inadvertently saying like this is rare and therefore
I think
women
so.
are not. Yeah,
But
fascinating.
this girl math is like that's bad enough. But then girl math is like girls being dumb, you know, which is 100 times worse.
We did a big deep dive into gender stereotypes for an article that I wrote, and we were looking at how magazines and news articles that are focused for men are all about grow your wealth, entrepreneurship, investing, and all of, you know, how to make the most of your money, whereas women's are all how to cut back in spending, how to save more, and all of this, and it's so frustrating.
Am I right in thinking you've got experience in this space or have done something around like the research of the way in which media speaks to us?
When I was writing my little like rage blackout about girl math, I researched it, and I do have a degree in psychology, so I've learned some of this stuff before, but mostly I just came across it when I was like trying to look at what might the consequences of this be. And I found this really interesting study about portrayal of women in visual media, where it was done by some banks in the UK, and they found that they just looked at the stock images, you know, that companies use when they put out media, and there was like disproportionate representations of women like hugging piggy banks and being like childlike with respect to money, or you know, really excitedly like putting their coin in the piggy bank, and whereas men obviously not the case. And so they found like quite striking differences, like 4 times the amount of childlike images of women with money. And it's just self-evident that is going to perpetuate the idea that women are less competent with their money, and that has a real effect on people's like personal relationships, the way they approach money with their partners, the way they think about themselves.
But imagine like young girls seeing that as well.
Totally.
Like growing up being like, oh, you know, I've got to scrimp and save. I must hug my piggy bank, you know, not I'm going to go out there and invest my money and grow my wealth. What was the response to your article when you put it out? Was it mixed? Were people like, yay, go you? Or people like, no, I like girl math? A bit like Soph?
It was mostly like positive, but I think that the people
positive for girl math.
Positive like, you know, I had quite a few people messaging to say like, similar to what we were saying at the start, like I didn't like girl math, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Like, thank you for articulating the problem, or just sharing their like own stories of struggling with like the perception that women are a bit worse and blah blah blah. That's been good. I'm sure that like a bunch of people have been thinking like, oh, you know, it's just a bit of fun, like, you know, we're too PC, like shush Bronwyn, but they tended not to.
You're actually the sweetest human ever. I'm shush Bronwyn, like everything you say is just like so sweet, don't you reckon?
I know, I can't imagine you going in companies or like talking, you know, like.
No, I just can't imagine you ever being like, this like it's funny because when you read it,
oh my god, is
like,
that a stereotype in itself?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I was about to be like, oh my god,
yeah, you just did it. You basically just caught yourself doing exactly what she's like. Fuck girl maths.
But I mean, you know, I like to think that we can all get there in our own ways, and like it's good to be yourself and stuff like that. But it is challenging because people do say that to me, like, oh, you seem like, you know,
but you just seem
kind. It's the not, kindness. Like, I can't imagine you being rude.
But that's kind of exactly it, though. Is that we relate the idea of economy and intelligence and power and all of that stuff with masculine energy and with male role models. So it's almost like, why can't it coexist that she's like a lovely, sweet, kind, beautiful human that's also incredibly good at her job? You know, it's like, but that's exactly what
it's a bit harder.
Yeah.
And the trouble is that there's just less women doing it because there's less women studying maths. There's less, like at high school, there's less kids studying economics that are women because they don't see it represented, and it just perpetuates this cycle, and then it's just a little bit harder. You know, it's just frustrating.
Can we also just go through some of the other points that you brought up in this article and reasons and why it, you know, because I think I want more examples or more like ways that I can bring this up in conversation and be confident in being like, no, girl math is problematic because of XYZ. I think the stereotype thing makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
Are there any other angles that you spoke about in the article that might...
I think the other thing is like, I totally agree that it's nice to have a laugh, and it's also nice to acknowledge that like we do all do these things. It's probably helpful to have a conversation about that and identify times where we might be driven by emotion to spend some money that we didn't really probably have. That's all good stuff. But on social media, we know like young people are disproportionately like learning from social media. And I think there's a real risk that people see this girl math thing and it's normalizing the idea of like being flippant and disengaging from your finances in a way that's counterproductive, really, when like young people are struggling. You know, it's not so easy to buy a house these days, our generation and the one coming. And they're worried about the future. They're worried about climate change and like what that's going to do. And we should be supporting them as best we can. And I think that there's a real danger when these trends come on social media and they're not supported by like other conversations, that people just think, oh, that's right. You know, I can buy this thing that's 50% off and I'm saving money, which could be true if you were going to buy it at full price anyway. That's not necessarily wrong. But if it creates a culture where you're normalizing making decisions that aren't really in your best interest, then I think that could be quite harmful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think I'd love to talk about other limitations and biases that are when it comes to money in general and for personal finances, because I think girl maths is one thing.
Yeah.
Is there other problematic biases or stereotypes or ways that we as a society are functioning that is actually quite detrimental to us as a gender?
I mean, I don't know if it's even specific to a gender. We all have like lots of information coming in, right? And we know that like our brain uses ways to process that information like as easily as possible. And some of those little like shortcuts that our brains use don't result in like necessarily the most optimal decision. And one of the most common ones is called present bias. And that's where you overweight the present state and disregard the future, or you, in finance terms, you attach a really low interest rate to you know, the present value of your future things. And so, for example, you might use buy now, pay later and think, I'll just figure it out. Or you might just like weigh up a decision in the wrong way. You might overly focus on benefits that happen now and not necessarily into the future, because you're overconfident that you'll be able to figure it out in the future. And it's also like, you know, future Bronwyn's problem. So you don't necessarily like focus on that. And that's a really common thing that like we all do.
It's like with eating healthy. You're like, oh, I can just have that non-healthy lollipop now, and then don't realize that you're going to have repercussions of having bad teeth and bad health down the track, because you're like, I want to prioritize presentness and present value
like
of eating that.
It's like, you know, delayed gratification that you always talk about, Vic. And I think it's something that, I guess when it comes to finances or money, it is that compounding effect of things. It's like you don't buy the coffee now, you don't buy the top now, you don't do all of these things, and like they all culminate. But like when you make one small decision in the moment without really thinking about the magnification of what that's going to mean in a year's time or 2 or 5, lots of those kinds of decisions can be really dangerous. Because
100%.
And it's like the value of that dinner, of not going out and spending $100 on dinner and drinks, is actually not, it's $100 in the present value, but it's not $100 in the future.
Yeah.
You've actually spent, even though you spent $100, you've actually spent $1,000 in the future, or whatever it is, from compounding.
Yeah,
so
your opportunity cost is pretty high, but you don't think about it because you want to go out for dinner and it's fun.
And it's fun and you're in the moment.
And by the way, you'll figure it out. You're going to earn heaps more money in the future. You know, we're all like a bit overconfident about that.
We get asked that a lot around how do you balance current you versus future you, because we're always like, save for your future, save for your 20-year holiday, which we rebranded retirement and made it 20-year holiday. But in terms of, and it's a hard one, because at one point when you're younger, you've got no dependents, you know, you've got probably no mortgage, you're in probably one of the most freest periods of your life. Totally. And yet you're being told to save and not travel and not spend on things, and so it's this whole dichotomy. But yeah, welcome to life, everyone. It's hard.
It's so hard, because in economics they would also say, well, when you're young you should borrow because your income's going to go up, but your time is going to go down. So, you know, have fun when you're like really young, at least, and borrow and, you know, pay for your uni and like take a job that gives you experience, that makes you no money, because that will pay off over time and you can do it now. So they have this income smoothing idea, but you can't do that forever, right? At some point you come to the point where your income has to compensate for the debt that you've accrued and all that stuff. And it's really hard.
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of like, you're pregnant, firstly.
Yeah.
Do you have a girl currently?
I have a girl and I'm having another girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of thinking about that next generation and for you personally, how this girl maths is what you hope to see change by it hopefully being quashed and, you know, dying a very fast death and not being something we talk about ever again. From, like a future generation, personal, like bringing girls up in the world, how does that make you feel and why is it so important?
Yeah, totally. Like I think that I wouldn't have written it. It sounds cheesy, but like maybe I wouldn't have written it or been so annoyed if I didn't have a daughter and a half. And I just, I want it to be better for them when they come through. And there's so much stuff about like raising women, like who like themselves. I think there's a book pretty much called like raising girls who like themselves. And it's totally related to the point.
I'd love to read that book.
About investors being encouraged, men being encouraged to be bold with your finances and that kind of thing. Similarly, you know, we encourage boys to like give it a try and women to like be careful.
Play it safe.
Yeah.
Don't hurt yourself. Even that phrase of like running when you're running out the door. It's like, oh, be careful, don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Everything we do is like,
everything.
Let us know when you get home safe. You know, like, it's like, I mean, I get it because like lovely. And if someone says that to me, I'm like, that's really nice. But do you say that to guys? Probably not.
Definitely
because are we
not.
like these delicate flowers that just like get
squashed?
Yeah, I'm sort of.
Yeah.
So yeah, it totally plays into it. Like I was lucky my mum was a maths teacher, so I was like raised by her teaching me maths, and like I never had this idea that women were bad at maths because I learned from my mum, but even still it affected me. And so I'm conscious of that, conscious of wanting to give my daughters the best chance possible and hopefully like them having a slightly less biased world to walk into, but we have to be realistic. But there's so many people doing awesome stuff in this space like you in this podcast, and we just need things like girl maths to get out of the way so that it doesn't, you know, get in the way of progress.
I like that. Get out of the way, girl math. I actually saw a funny thing and it was about boy math, and it was on TikTok, and it was like boy math is when a guy says that he's 6'2", but he's actually 5'8".
I love that.
And I was like, go viral.
Yeah. Honestly though, like if you're using a dating app and someone says that they're like 6 foot, they're 100% not 6 foot. Like,
or if there's no height on there, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
You're like, why haven't you put your height?
Often I'll zoom and I'm like, how long are the legs in proportion to the stool they're standing next to? You know, like, which is so
Sophie's got a ruler
No,
out.
it's just that I'm sure I'm quite tall, and that's fine. You know, whatever. I don't need to date someone taller than me.
How
but
tall is the guy that you're dating now?
Shut up. Fucking hell.
Sophie has ripped into my dating life for so long, and finally
She
she's
is
dating someone. So I'm like,
loving the chance to like actually really call me up.
he's like 6'7"?
Really tall.
Yeah. 6'8".
Super tall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. We
Anyway,
digress.
I'm renting out my house at the moment, and someone came over to assess whether it'll be, you know, I wanted to do short-term kind of Airbnb style, and this person came over, this agent, and he instantly started, my boyfriend was there at the time, and he started.
Never heard you calling your boyfriend on the podcast. Did anyone else hear that?
Anyway.
My boyfriend, like, it's like she's
so casually
my
as well.
fiance, you know.
Came out naturally.
Anyway, my friend,
Sorry.
good old
I
flower
was-
man was sitting there just working away on the table, and the agent kept talking to him, and he was looking there uncomfortable because he's like, this isn't my house, like, why are you talking to me and giving all, it was so weird, and I should have said something, but I kind of didn't.
Did you not?
No, I
You
just
just
kept
panic in
being
the
like,
situation. Yeah. Totally.
look at me. And then he's like, how long have you two lived here? And I just, all this, I don't know. It was quite.
Oh my God, I really think next time
Yeah.
you need to put your foot down and be like, this is actually my house, I own it.
Yes.
That's
It's not, talk to me. Yeah.
It's so hard
direct
in
those
those
questions in
moments.
this way. Because
Yeah.
you also don't want to be,
Make them uncomfortable.
Aggressive?
Like, I don't know.
I know, and
Yeah.
also we're told to be like nice and
Yeah.
cute and don't make a fuss and people
Yeah.
will like you. You know, we actually had an interesting conversation with Dr. Rebecca Ray about this, and it was the idea that, and it's probably similar to the self-perpetuating girl math toxic trend, is like how we have been told for so long to, like, you know, to be liked, you basically can't be rude, you can't be this, you can't be that, and so boundaries are kind of just not something that we talk about or can seem to
Totally.
implement without coming across as rude,
aggressive,
blunt, etc. And it was a real mind-blowing moment for me.
And it can totally affect your personal relationships as well. This whole thing, like some of my friends that, like after they read the article, they said, like they started sharing that like there was a perception that like their partner would be more in control, and then they had to, maybe be seen to be a bit aggressive to like not even the score, but like to get an equal footing when it comes to personal finances within their relationship, and like had to kind of stick their neck out in fear of like, I don't know, setting their relationship backwards. But it's important if you want to have there's a million ways to structure your personal finances with your partner or not. But just the perception that women are not as good with money then has an effect on like putting you on the back foot maybe in your personal relationship, and then, having to risk being seen to be aggressive just to get equal conversation going. Like that's just... You're just, like you said, pushing shit uphill.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to contribute to the financial conversations in the household or with my partner because I've been told for so many years that I'm terrible with money because women are terrible with money.
I think that I do that a lot, though. And even saying things like, I'm bad with maps, or I'm bad with this. It's like but even that, because then every time I have to go and get myself somewhere or find directions or whatever, I'm like, I'm bad at maps, so someone else do it. It's like you're constantly reinforcing these narratives that like may or may not be true, and also can be. Yeah, it comes down to everything and the way in which that we, as you were saying earlier, then perform in certain areas. Like because I self-identify as a shit driver and bad at directions, I'm probably going to continue to be a shit driver in bad directions.
Yeah,
when really, if I was like, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I can't be real good at finances and money. I don't know. It's interesting how powerful language can be.
Yeah, 100%. The language that you use to yourself is so important. Even one of my old colleagues, he always used to say, you can't do it yet. And like just the idea, like you can learn that thing. You can learn how to be good at maps. You can learn to improve your finances, etc.
Yeah, we used to say that when people would be like, what do you do? And we're like, we just have a financial education platform. We always used to do it. And then as soon as we were
actually away on holiday and we were like practicing it. We were walking, do you remember? We were walking down the street and we were like, okay, let's just practice ourselves in this situation. So that's like, what do you do for work? And we were like, we have a financial education platform, and we were like having to like repeat it again and again without saying just. And the amount of times you got to say just.
And it dumbs it down and it makes it small and insignificant. And it's like, no, own it.
Yeah.
And it's with everything in life. It's making it,
I take it back. I hate girl math.
Yay, we did it.
Yay.
I'm on board. I hate girl math. It's
One thing
I
want to know is about how do we stop ourselves or be more conscious about the stereotypes, because we've just done it. We're in a podcast talking about breaking down gender stereotypes and we've literally caught ourselves in the last half an hour. How do we be more conscious of the things that we are saying and the effect they have on people?
It's so hard. I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert in these things, but my guess is that the best way is to have more representation by women in finance, maths, economics, so that we don't think it, because like we all think it, and it's great if you can catch yourself doing it and go like, whoops, because that's awesome. But I really feel like until we have more representation.
And it's not just gender representation.
No, exactly. It's not.
All cultures, ethnicities, backgrounds, ages, stages, whatever.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if there's anyone listening, or they know someone listening who might want to get in touch and be like, hey, I was thinking maybe I wanted to start a career in this, or like, are you open to talking to people about what that experience is like?
100%. If anyone wants to like talk about what it's like to work in economics or anything that we spoke about, like, hit me up.
And I'll put the link to your article in our podcast show notes. So if someone wants to read it, they can, because we've been like, the article. Like, where the fuck is the article?
all the views and the reads going like skyrocketing. I love that.
But thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so sorry about the times in which the last hour I have shot down you and your career based on what you look like. Because yeah, we can do better than that.
We can.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm such a huge fan of your podcast, so it's really cool. It's really cool for me to be here.
Yay. Okay, amazing. And if anyone wants to find out more about what you do, where's the best way for that? Is it LinkedIn, the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't tell you my mobile number.
021.
What's your address and what's your
my car license plate?
LinkedIn, Bronwyn Taylor. It says something like Auckland Economist or something.
Amazing.
Well, she's Bronwyn Taylor from the Commerce Commission. So
that's right.
Yeah. Also, if anybody is listening, sees something like an amazing article or hears someone talk on a different podcast or reads a book, like it's so nice to get recommendations of people that you think we'd be interested in talking to and that you want to hear us interview, because this was totally not our idea and we're very grateful for the person who got in touch. Thank you so much for listening to Raising the Curve. These conversations are designed to teach you everything that you need to know to be better with your money, from saving to investing to talking to your friends about your salaries.
And if you liked what you heard, we would love it if you could hit the subscribe button, please.
Yes,
or
please.
better yet, leave a review. It only
nice
takes 5 seconds and it would really make our week, our year, our month.
Okay, lots of love. See you soon.
Bye.